Sarah Donovan slapped the ownership papers on the table, silencing the very store owners who'd mocked her pathetic little phone case kiosk into oblivion. 8 months ago, Richard Mercer had smirked while signing her eviction petition. Now, his face drained of color as she became his landlord. Behind her business wasn't just ambition, it was desperation. Every case she sold was another dollar toward her daughter's mounting medical bills. Every laugh at her expense another wound as she worked through exhaustion while her child fought for her life in a hospital bed. What happens when the underdog you ridiculed becomes your boss overnight? If this story hit you in the gut, smash that subscribe button and drop your revenge to redemption story in the comments below. The security guard, at least, had the decency to look uncomfortable. Sarah Donovan clutched the edge of her kiosk counter, knuckles white, as mall management dismantled her livelihood piece by piece. "You have 30 minutes to remove your inventory," the mall manager said, consulting his clipboard with clinical detachment. "Anything left will be considered abandoned property." Sarah bit her lip, refusing to let them see her cry. Rain pattered against the skylight above, a perfect accompaniment to her unraveling life. She began packing her handcrafted phone cases into cardboard boxes, each one representing hours of work, each one designed to help pay for another day of her daughter's treatment. From the corner of her eye, she caught the smug expressions of the other store owners. Richard Mercer, whose high-end watch boutique faced her modest kiosk, didn't even try to hide his satisfaction. He stood with arms crossed, designer suit impeccable, watching her downfall like it was entertainment. Finally, she overheard him say to the owner of the adjacent jewelry store, "That eyesore was driving away our clientele." Sarah's hands trembled as she remembered the petition they'd circulated. Richard had spearheaded it, gathering signatures from nearly every store in the mall, claiming her tacky little operation was degrading the shopping experience for discerning customers. A security guard approached with another empty box. His eyes held unexpected kindness. "Take your time, ma'am," he said quietly, glancing at his colleagues. "I'll stall them if I can." Sarah nodded gratefully, carefully wrapping her most intricate designs. Each case represented a tiny piece of hope, delicate, hand-painted designs that had garnered a small but loyal following, just not enough to justify her space in premier retail real estate, according to management. As she packed the last box, her phone vibrated. The hospital's number flashed on screen, sending ice through her veins. "Emma." She answered with trembling fingers, turning away from Richard's watchful gaze. "Ms. Donovan, this is Dr. Patel. There's been a change in Emma's condition. We need you to come in right away." The phone nearly slipped from her grasp. "I'll be right there." She stacked the final box, catching Richard's eye as she lifted it. Something in her expression must have communicated the gravity of her situation, because his smirk faltered momentarily. "Need help with those boxers?" the security guard offered. "No," Sarah replied, gathering her strength. "I've been carrying heavier things than this on my own for a long time." Rain soaked through her jacket as she loaded boxes into her ancient Honda, the weight of uncertainty crushing her chest. The mall's gleaming facade mocked her as she drove away, her rearview mirror capturing Richard watching her departure, his expression unreadable in the distance. She had no time to mourn her business. Emma needed her now. Sarah's wet shoes squeaked against the hospital's polished floor as she hurried through familiar corridors. The pediatric ward's primary-colored walls and cheerful animal murals had long since lost their power to comfort her. After 3 months of regular visits, all she saw was the institutional sterility beneath the facade. Outside Emma's room, Dr. Patel waited with the measured composure that experienced physicians develop. His expression revealed nothing. "What happened?" Sarah asked, still catching her breath. Her fever spiked suddenly. "We've adjusted her medication, and she's responding well now." He consulted his tablet. "But these episodes are becoming more frequent." Sarah pushed damp hair from her forehead. "Can I see her?" Emma lay small against the white sheets, her 12-year-old frame diminished by illness. Monitoring equipment beeped steadily beside her. Despite everything, she smiled when she saw her mother. "Hey, Mom." Her voice was thin but determined. "You're all wet." Sarah forced brightness into her voice. "Just a little rain." She smoothed Emma's strawberry blonde hair, so like her own. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "Like I got hit by a truck. Then the truck backed up and hit me again." Emma's attempt at humor was undercut by the dark circles beneath her eyes. "Did you sell any cool cases today?" Sarah hesitated, then sat on the edge of the bed. Actually, I need to tell you something. She took Emma's hand, noting how the 4-needle disappeared beneath medical tape. The mall. They asked me to leave. Emma's face fell. But why? Your cases are beautiful. Business, politics, honey, nothing for you to worry about. Dr. Patel entered, saving Sarah from further explanation. Emma, your latest test results show your immune system is still attacking your kidneys. We need to discuss adjusting your treatment plan. The conversation that followed was one Sarah had experienced too many times since Emma's diagnosis with a rare autoimmune disorder 6 months ago. Medical terminology washed over her: immunosuppressants, biologics, experimental protocols, option more expensive than the last. There's a new treatment showing promising results, Dr. Patel explained, but it's still in clinical trials. We could apply for compassionate use. And if we can't get into the program, Sarah asked, there are other options, but honestly, none as promising for Emma's specific condition. Later, when Emma had drifted to sleep, Sarah followed Dr. Patel into the hallway. Be straight with me. How much would this treatment cost without insurance? His hesitation told her everything. The medication alone would be approximately $12,000 per month. Sarah's knees nearly buckled. For how long? Minimum 6 months. Possibly indefinitely. She pressed her fist against her mouth, suppressing a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Well, that's impossible. Ms. Donovan, no, you don't understand. I was just laid off from Biocore 3 months ago. They downsized my entire department. The bitterness resurfaced. 18 years I gave them, and they cut my insurance the same month Emma got diagnosed. The memory of her supervisors rehearsed speech still burned. Budget restructuring had been the euphemism for eliminating her research assistant position. Her insurance had disappeared overnight, leaving Emma vulnerable at the worst possible moment. There are assistance programs, Dr. Patel began. I've applied to all of them. We're on waiting lists. Sarah rubbed her temples. The kiosk was bringing in enough to cover the current medications, but now, double quotes, Dr. Patel's pager beeped. He checked it with a frown. I need to go. We'll talk more tomorrow about options. Alone in the hallway, Sarah slumped against the wall. Through the window in Emma's door, she could see her daughter's chest rising and falling in sleep. Emma had her mother's determination and her father's creativity before he'd decided. Family life was too constraining for his artistic ambitions and disappeared to find himself in Colorado with a yoga instructor. Sarah returned to Emma's bedside, careful not to disturb her. She took out her sketchpad, the one creative outlet she'd maintained through years of scientific work, and began designing a new phone case pattern. Each stroke of her pencil was a prayer, a promise. I won't let you down, she whispered to her sleeping daughter. Whatever it takes. Emma stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Mom, are you still here? Always, Sarah said, taking her hand. Try to rest. Will you be okay without the kiosk? Sarah smiled with a confidence she didn't feel. Of course. This is just a setback. I'm already planning something better. Promise. I promise. Now go back to sleep. As Emma drifted off, Sarah continued sketching, her mind racing. She needed a job immediately. Any job. The hospital bills were mounting, rent was due, and Emma's regular medications alone cost hundreds each month. Tomorrow, she would begin a new job search. Tonight, she would allow herself these quiet hours of planning, of dreaming, of refusing to surrender to despair, while her daughter fought her own battle against her rebellious immune system. We're fighters, Emma, she whispered, and fighters don't quit. Sarah's apartment felt smaller each day. What had once been a cozy 2-bedroom now resembled a cluttered storage unit. Her kitchen table had disappeared beneath a sea of pink paper past due notices. Final warnings and threatening letters from collection agencies formed a grim collage of her financial collapse. She sorted them methodically. Immediate threats, electricity, rent, secondary concerns, credit cards, phone, and lost causes medical bills she couldn't begin to address. The ritual had become a nightly exercise in desperation. Mathematics calculating which payments would keep essential services running for another month. Emma's bedroom door remained closed. Sarah had insisted she stay with her grandmother while recovering from her latest hospital stay, partly to shield her from witnessing their deteriorating circumstances. The emptiness of the apartment amplified Sarah's isolation. On the counter sat the last box of inventory from her kiosk phone cases, too specialized to sell quickly online. She'd already liquidated most of her stock at desperate discounts. Just enough to cover Emma's basic medications. Her laptop displayed her bank balance, $237.14. Rent was due in 3 days, $1,450. Sarah pulled open her 4 emergencies drawer, now nearly empty. Her mother's silver bracelet, her college graduation watch, and her wedding ring, kept more from forgetfulness than sentiment, lay on a cloth. She'd already sold her television, her good winter coat, and her cherished collection of scientific journals. The wedding ring went into her pocket. That would cover medication refills, at least. Her phone chimed with an email notification, another rejection, this time from a laboratory supply company. The position had gone to someone with more recent experience. 57 applications, 12 interviews, 0 offers. Her resume now featured a 3-month employment gap that grew more concerning to potential employers. With each passing week, her experience at Biocore counted for little without current references. Her former supervisor had been laid off shortly after her, and the company's HR department provided only dates of employment. Sarah opened the refrigerator, half a gallon of milk, some eggs, and lunch meat approaching its expiration date. She'd been skipping meals to stretch their food budget, telling herself she wasn't really hungry anyway. A knock at the door startled her. The landlord, probably. He'd been stopping by with increasing frequency, making pointed comments about other tenants interested in the unit. Instead, she found Mrs. Chen from next door, holding a foil-covered dish. "I made too much lasagna," she said, though they both knew it was a kindness rather than an accident. "I thought you might enjoy some." Sarah's pride warred with her hunger. "That's very kind, but please, my Antonio made me promise to bring it. He worries about you working so hard." Sarah accepted with murmured thanks, knowing her 8-year-old neighbor's concern was genuine. The small kindness nearly broke her composure. After Mrs. Chen left, Sarah sat at her cluttered table, pushing aside bills to make space for the warm dish. She allowed herself 3 bites before wrapping the rest for tomorrow. Emma would be home for the weekend. She needed to ensure there was enough food. Her phone buzzed with a text from her ex-husband. "Sorry, can't make child support this month. Gallery showing cancelled. We'll make it up next month. Tell Emmy hi." Sarah stared at the message, too exhausted for anger. Michael's promises had grown as insubstantial as mist over the 3 years since their divorce. His sporadic payments had stopped entirely when Emma got sick, his artistic temperament apparently incompatible with hospital visits and medical discussions. She typed several responses before deleting them all and setting the phone aside. Energy wasted on Michael was energy taken from Emma. As midnight approached, Sarah sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, surrounded by printouts of assistance programs, grant applications, and medical research on Emma's condition. Her eyes burned from fatigue, but sleep remained elusive. On a blank page, she began listing assets, her scientific background, her design skills, her determination. Next, a list of unconventional income possibilities: online design work, scientific editing, clinical trial participation. The wedding ring glinted on the nightstand where she'd placed it. One last connection to a failed relationship, to a man who had promised to stand by her in sickness and health, vows he'd abandoned when life became challenging. "I refuse to give up," she whispered to the empty room. The words, a declaration and a promise. "I refuse to be beaten." The first light of dawn found Sarah still awake, a plan forming from desperation and determination. She would apply for any job available tomorrow: janitorial, food service, retail. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. For Emma, she would scrub floors if necessary. For Emma, she would endure anything, even starting over from nothing. The Apex Ventures building gleamed like a crystal monolith against the morning sky. Its 50 floors of steel and glass housing some of the most influential venture capitalists in the region. Sarah felt conspicuously out of place in her only remaining professional outfit, a navy pantsuit she'd purchased during more prosperous times, now slightly too loose on her frame. 4th floor, janitorial services, the security guard directed. After checking her visitor's pass. In the elevator, Sarah straightened her spine and practiced her smile in the mirrored wall. The position paid $16.50 per hour with partial benefits after 90 days, not enough to cover Emma's treatments, but a start. The janitorial supervisor, a harried woman named Gloria, met her with a clipboard and perfunctory handshake. Experience, she asked, pen hovering over the form. None professionally, Sarah admitted, but I maintained lab sterilization protocols at Biocore Pharmaceuticals for 18 years. Gloria raised an eyebrow. Overqualified much. I need the work, Sarah said simply. The interview progressed with questions about availability and physical limitations. Sarah emphasized her reliability and attention to detail, swallowing her pride with each response. Wait here, Gloria said eventually. Need to check something. Left alone in the small office, Sarah could hear voices from the adjacent conference room through the thin wall. Male voices, discussing investment strategies. Westridge Mall is a dying asset, someone declared. Their anchor stores are hemorrhaging money, and foot traffic dropped 30% last quarter. Sarah stiffened. Westridge, her former workplace, management's incompetent, another voice added. They're driving out smaller vendors with rate hikes while failing to attract customers. Classic death spiral. Perfect acquisition target. A third voice concluded. Property value alone exceeds current market cap. Sarah leaned closer to the wall, her scientific curiosity piqued. The discussion continued, detailing mismanagement and missed opportunities that aligned perfectly with what she'd observed during her time at the mall. The door opened suddenly. Gloria returned, accompanied by a tall woman in an impeccable charcoal suit. Her silver-streaked black hair was swept into a sleek bun, and her appraising gaze reminded Sarah of her former research director, Miss Donovan. I'm Elaine Winters, senior partner. Her handshake was firm. Gloria tells me you worked at Biocore. Yes, for 18 years. Research assistant in pharmaceuticals. Interesting. And you're applying for our janitorial team. Sarah met her gaze directly. I need employment. My daughter has medical needs. Something in Elaine's expression shifted subtly. Step into my office for a moment, would you? Confused, Sarah followed, hurried down a corridor of glass-walled offices to a corner suite with panoramic city views. I couldn't help noticing your reaction when Westridge Mall was mentioned, Elaine said, settling behind her desk. Sarah tensed. I apologize for eavesdropping. Don't. Elaine waved dismissively. You looked like you had thoughts on the matter. Sarah hesitated, then decided she had nothing to lose. The management is driving away small businesses that brought unique value. My kiosk was removed last week despite consistent sales because it didn't fit their upscale image. Meanwhile, 3 major retailers have closed in 6 months. Elaine leaned forward. You had a business there. Custom phone accessories. Small but profitable until they tripled my lease rate with no warning. Interesting. Elaine studied her with new intensity. Would you say the mall's current trajectory is salvageable? The question awakened something in Sarah's analytical skills, long dormant in her scramble for survival. She considered carefully before answering. With current management, no, but the location has untapped potential. The property connects to affluent neighborhoods and has the only covered parking in the retail district. The food court renovation was their only successful initiative in years because it focused on local vendors rather than chains. Elaine's expression remained neutral, but her eyes sharpened with interest. Go on. They're failing because they're trying to be something they're not, a luxury destination without the anchor stores to support that identity. They've alienated the local shoppers who sustained them through previous downturns. The words flowed more easily now. Observations Sarah hadn't realized she'd been collecting during her months at the kiosk. If someone wanted to revitalize that property, she concluded, they'd need to embrace its community connections rather than trying to exclude them. A long silence followed. Elaine tapped her pen against her desk, considering. Ms. Donovan, would you join me for coffee tomorrow? I'd like to continue this conversation. Sarah blinked in confusion. I don't understand. What about the janitorial position? I think your talents might be better utilized elsewhere. Elaine handed her a business card. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., at Vero's across the street. My treat. As Sarah left the building, clutching the card, her phone buzzed with a text from her mother, Emma, asking when she can come home. Good day today. Missing you. She stared at Elaine's card, embossed with the Apex Ventures logo. Whatever had just happened felt significant, though she couldn't yet understand how. Something better, she whispered, remembering her promise to Emma. For the first time in months, the words didn't feel like a lie. Vero's coffee exuded quiet sophistication, reclaimed wood and brushed steel. with prices to match its upscale ambience. Sarah arrived 15 minutes early, wearing her interview suit again, heart racing with uncertainty about what awaited her. Elaine Winters was already there, occupying a corner table with a view of both the entrance and the street. A cup steamed on the table. "I took the liberty," Elaine said, gesturing to the drink. "Hope you don't mind." Sarah settled into the chair, hyper-aware of its probable cost. "Thank you for inviting me, Ms. Winters, though I'm still not sure why." "Elaine, please." She sipped her coffee. "And I invited you because you intrigued me yesterday. People with your observational skills are rare." Sarah wrapped her hands around the warm mug, unsure how to respond. "Tell me your story," Elaine said. "The real one, not the interview version." Perhaps it was the direct approach, or perhaps it was simply fatigue. But Sarah found herself recounting the past 6 months with surprising candorama's diagnosis. The layoff, her ex-husband's absence, the phone case business born of desperation, and finally, the eviction from Westridge Mall. Elaine listened without interruption, her expression revealing nothing beyond attentive interest. "And now," she asked when Sarah finished, "now I find any job that will help keep us afloat until I can get back into my field." Elaine nodded thoughtfully. "May I share something with you?" Without waiting for an answer, she continued, 30 years ago, I was a single mother working as a hotel housekeeper while taking night classes in finance." The revelation surprised Sarah. Nothing in Elaine's polished exterior suggested such humble beginnings. "My daughter needed speech therapy insurance wouldn't cover. I cleaned rooms during the day and balanced books for small businesses at night." Elaine's voice carried no self-pity, only matter-of-fact recollection. "I understand survival mode." She opened a sleek leather portfolio and extracted several documents. "These are our initial necessities of Westridge Mall. I'd like your thoughts." Sarah reviewed the paper's financial summaries, occupancy rates, demographic profiles. The data confirmed her observations. The mall was severely undervalued despite its strategic location. "The management is alienating their core customer base," Sarah noted, pointing to a chart showing declining foot traffic. "They're trying to attract luxury shoppers who are already committed to the Galleria across town. Meanwhile, they're losing the middle-market consumers who should be their bread and butter." Precisely what I suspected. Elaine leaned forward. "Now, what would you do differently?" The question caught Sarah off guard. "Me? Hypothetically, if you controlled Westridge Mall, how would you revitalize it?" Sarah considered carefully. "I'd lower rates for local businesses with proven community appeal. Create an incubator program for small vendors to test concepts without committing to long-term leases. Repurpose the vacant department store for mixed-use facilities, maybe a community, college satellite campus or medical offices to drive daily traffic." As she spoke, Elaine took notes, occasionally nodding. When Sarah finished, a subtle smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Ms. Donovan, Sarah Peck's Ventures is preparing to acquire Westridge Mall, assuming our final assessment confirms its potential." "Congratulations," Sarah replied, unsure where this was leading. "Here's my proposition. I want you involved in this project." Sarah nearly choked on her coffee. "I don't understand. I have no real estate experience. No business degree. What you have is more valuable intimate knowledge of the property and its potential, plus the motivation to succeed." Elaine's gaze was penetrating. "I recognize hunger when I see it, and intelligence. What exactly are you offering?" "A partnership, of sorts. I'll provide the capital and business guidance. You'll provide the vision and execution." Elaine slid a document across the table. "This outlines a 3-month training and assessment period. If successful, you'll become the property manager with equity participation." Sarah's hands trembled as she scanned the document. The proposed compensation would cover Emma's medical expenses with room to spare. "Why me?" she asked finally. "This makes no sense." "Because sometimes the person with the most to lose makes the best fighter." Elaine's expression softened momentarily. "And because 30 years ago, someone took a chance on me when I needed it desperately, I'm merely continuing the tradition." Sarah stared at the document, mind racing. This was either the answer to her prayers or too good to be true. "I need time to think," she said carefully. "Of course. But not too long. We move quickly." Elaine gathered her papers. "One more thing. The current management doesn't know we're interested. Our acquisition depends on their continuing to undervalue the property. You want me to keep this confidential?" "Absolutely." especially from anyone connected to Westridge. The implication was clear, specifically Richard Mercer and the other store owners who had engineered her eviction. As they parted ways outside the cafe, Elaine handed Sarah another document. My personal number. Call me when you decide. Either way, good luck. With your daughter, alone on the sidewalk, Sarah watched Elaine's sleek town car pull away. The opportunity seemed impossible, yet the paper in her hand was real enough. Her phone buzzed. The hospital again. Whatever decision she made, it needed to be soon. Emma couldn't wait. Net operating income is calculated by subtracting operating expenses from revenue, Sarah muttered, highlighting the formula in her textbook. 3 empty coffee cups surrounded her at Emma's bedside, where she'd been studying since 5 a.m. Mom, you're talking to yourself again, Emma observed, looking up from her tablet. Her color had improved since starting the new medication treatment Elaine had helped secure through one of Apex's healthcare connections. Sorry, sweetheart. Real estate finance isn't exactly bedtime reading. Sarah rubbed her eyes. How's the homework going? Almost done. Mrs. Williams says I can take the science test tomorrow if I feel up to it. Sarah checked her watch. I need to meet Elaine in an hour. Grandma will pick you up, okay? The past 6 weeks had transformed Sarah's life into a whirlwind of education. Mornings in Elaine's office, reviewing acquisition strategies. Afternoons shadowing successful property managers across the company's portfolio. Evenings studying commercial real estate principles until her eyes burned. All while visiting Emma daily and maintaining the appearance of a woman simply looking for employment, not someone preparing to acquire the very mall that had evicted her. In Elaine's downtown office, floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline. Sarah now felt comfortable in this environment of glass and steel, no longer intimidated by its opulence. Retail anchor tenant negotiations, Elaine announced, sliding a folder across her desk. Today's challenge. Sarah reviewed the contents. Struggling department store requesting rent concessions at another Apex property. They're leveraging their status as an anchor to demand unreasonable terms, she observed. I'd counter with a modified percentage lease structure, lower base rent, but higher revenue sharing if they exceed targeted sales. Elaine nodded approvingly. You've been studying. Good. I've had motivation. Sarah gestured to the photo of Emma now displayed on her desk. How's the Westridge acquisition progressing? Due diligence is nearly complete. Their Q2 financials were even worse than projected. They're eager to sell. Elaine's smile held satisfaction. The current ownership doesn't recognize what they have. When do we move? Soon. The board meets next week to approve final terms. Elaine studied Sarah carefully. Are you ready for what comes after? The question carried weight beyond professional preparation. Sarah understood the subtext. Was she ready to face the people who had dismissed her, now as their landlord? I've been ready since the day they tore down my kiosk. Later that afternoon, Sarah found herself in the offices of Red Brick Development, shadowing their retail director, Marcus Hernandez. Location is emotional, not just geographical, Marcus explained as they toured a recently revitalized shopping center. People form attachments to places where significant life events occur, first dates, family traditions, celebrations. Tap into that emotional connection, and customers return regardless of convenience. Sarah noted this insight with particular interest. Westridge Mall had hosted community events for decades: local dance recitals, seasonal craft fairs, holiday celebrations. The current management had eliminated most of these unprofitable activities, not recognizing their role in customer loyalty. How do you balance community needs with profitability? She asked. Marcus smiled. That's the million-dollar question. Short-term, they can seem at odds. Long-term, they're inseparable. A property disconnected from its community eventually fails. Each evening, Sarah returned to her apartment now, slightly less cluttered as her financial situation stabilized, and reviewed the day's lessons. Commercial leasing structures, tenant improvement allowances, marketing strategies for retail properties. She maintained a separate notebook of ideas specifically for Westridge Mall. Often working late into the night, Emma sometimes joined her at the kitchen table, doing homework while Sarah studied. Their mutual determination, a quiet bond between them. Will we be rich when you own the mall? Emma asked one evening. Sarah looked up from her laptop. Not exactly. It's more complicated than that. But we won't have to worry about hospital bills anymore, right? Sarah moved to sit beside her daughter, pulling her close. That's the plan. But there's a lot of work ahead. Is it because of those mean people who made you leave? The question caught Sarah off guard. She'd been careful not to share too many details of her eviction with Emma. Partly, she admitted. But it's also about creating something better for us and for the community. Emma considered this, twirling a strand of hair around her finger. Are you going to make them leave like they made you leave? The innocent question struck at the heart of something Sarah had been wrestling with. Revenge had been her initial motivation. The fantasy of watching Richard Mercer and the others squirm had sustained her through difficult days, but something had shifted during her education with Elaine. No, she said finally. That wouldn't make anything better. I'm going to show them a different way to do business. Emma nodded sagely. Good grandma says, revenge just makes you like the people who hurt you. Out of the mouths of babes, Sarah thought. The following week, Elaine invited Sarah to observe the final acquisition meeting from an adjacent conference room through one-way glass. She watched as Westridge Mall's ownership representatives, none of whom had ever bothered to learn her name, during her months as a tenant signed away the property for less than its potential value. Congratulations, Elaine said afterward, handing Sarah a copy of the executed agreement. Phase 1 complete. Sarah ran her fingers over the document, the reality sinking in. What happens now? Now, Elaine replied with a gleam in her eye. We prepare for your debut as Westridge's new management. I hope you're ready to make an entrance. The Platinum Towers conference room exuded old-world power mahogany paneling, leather chairs, and a spectacular view of the city's financial district. Sarah sat quietly beside Elaine, dressed in the role of executive assistant. Her charcoal suit was new, purchased with her first advance from Apex Ventures, her hair pulled back in a conservative bun. Across the table sat Westridge Mall's ownership group, 3 silver-haired men in expensive suits and one younger woman, whose sharp gaze suggested she was the only one who had actually read the prospectus. Gentlemen, Ms. Reynolds, Elaine began, let's discuss the future of Westridge Mall. Sarah kept her expression neutral, taking notes on her tablet while studying the seller's body language. None of them recognized her. Why would they? To them, she had been merely a name on a lease, insignificant amid their portfolio of properties. Your offer seems conservative, said Gerald Hoffman, the ownership group spokesman. The property has significant upside potential. Elaine smiled pleasantly. Does it? Your occupancy rate has fallen 12% in the past year. Anchor tenant sales are down. Your most recent audit noted deferred maintenance exceeding $2 million. Temporary setbacks, Hoffman insisted. Our new luxury repositioning initiative has alienated your core customer base while failing to attract the demographic you're targeting, Elaine finished. Sarah, the performance metrics, please. Sarah handed over a carefully prepared folder. Her fingers brushed against Hoffman's, and she felt a small thrill. This man had signed off on her eviction without a second thought. As you can see, Elaine continued, foot traffic declined most sharply after you raised rates on local retailers. The resulting tenant turnover created a perception of instability. The younger woman Reynolds leaned forward. These figures are concerning. Where did you source this data? We conduct thorough due diligence, Elaine replied smoothly. The meeting continued, a carefully choreographed dance of offer and counteroffer. Sarah remained silent, observing as Elaine methodically addressed and dismissed each of the owner's claims about the property's value. Your basement level is 80% vacant, Elaine noted. The roof requires replacement within 18 months, and your relationship with the remaining tenants appears adversarial at best. Hoffman shifted uncomfortably. The retail landscape is challenging everywhere, indeed, which is why our offer reflects current market realities. Sarah admired Elaine's technique, firm, but never confrontational, each point supported by irrefutable data. The seller's resistance gradually eroded under this steady pressure. During a brief recess, Sarah and Elaine stepped into an adjacent room. They're weakening, Elaine observed. Reynolds knows the property is underperforming. The men are still in denial. Hoffman was responsible for the tenant relations policy, Sarah noted. He's defending his decisions more than the property value. Elaine nodded. Exactly. When we reconvene, I'll focus on future capital requirements. That should push them toward acceptance. The strategy worked perfectly. When Elaine detailed the investments required to maintain the property investments, the current owners were unwilling to make their resistance crumbled. We accept your terms, Hoffman announced finally, with the condition that the transaction remains confidential until after the holiday shopping season. Agreed, said Elaine. We'll need 30 days for closing procedures. Sarah will coordinate with your team. As documents were prepared for preliminary signatures, Reynolds approached Sarah. You look familiar, she said. Have we met before? Sarah's pulse quickened, but her expression remained professional. I don't believe so. I would have remembered. The younger woman nodded, though her eyes reflected lingering uncertainty. By late afternoon, the preliminary agreement was signed. The Westridge Mall would officially change hands in 30 days, just before Thanksgiving. As they rode the elevator down to the lobby, Elaine turned to Sarah. Well done. You maintained perfect composure. They had no idea who I was, Sarah replied, a mix of satisfaction and disbelief in her voice. To them, you were invisible then, and you're invisible now, just in a different way. It's remarkable how people see only what they expect to see. Outside, in Elaine's town car, Sarah finally allowed herself to smile. We actually did it. Phase 1, Elaine corrected. The real work begins now. Back at Apex's offices, they reviewed next steps. Financing details, transition planning, preliminary outreach to key tenants. Sarah would remain behind the scenes until ownership formally transferred, with Elaine serving as the public face of the acquisition. What about after the transfer? Sarah asked. When do I step forward? Strategically, Elaine replied. First, as the new property manager, building relationships with tenants, your equity participation remains confidential. Initially, people take women owners more seriously once they've established authority. Sarah nodded, understanding the reality behind Elaine's advice. That evening, Sarah stood in Emma's doorway, watching her daughters sleeping peacefully. The new treatment was working. Her labs showed improvement, her energy returning gradually. Sarah's phone vibrated with a text from Elaine. Congratulations. You're now unofficially in the real estate business. She typed back. Thank you for believing in me. The response came quickly. I believe in hungry fighters. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we plan your comeback. Sarah slipped into Emma's room and gently adjusted her blanket. We're going to be okay, she whispered. Better than okay. On her nightstand, Sarah placed the day's most meaningful acquisition, the signed purchase agreement, but a small brass nameplate Elaine had presented her after the meeting. It read simply, Sarah Donovan, Director of Property Management, a title that would soon appear on the directory of Westridge Mall directly above the space once occupied by her humble kiosk. 3 a.m. found Sarah still awake, her kitchen table transformed into command central for Operation Westridge. Spreadsheets covered every surface, tenant profiles, lease termination dates, foot traffic patterns. Her laptop displayed architectural renderings of proposed renovations. Sleep had become a luxury she couldn't afford, not with the ownership transferred just 2 weeks away. Every minute not spent with Emma was dedicated to planning the mall's transformation. She massaged her temples, fighting fatigue. The transition team had identified critical issues requiring immediate attention: the leaking roof over the north entrance, outdated HVAC systems, and security concerns in the poorly lit parking structure. But beyond infrastructure, Sarah focused on the human element, the relationships damaged by previous management. She had compiled detailed profiles of every tenant, noting their history, community connections, and potential. Richard Mercer's watch boutique appeared on her screen, profitable but declining, catering to an aging clientele. His lease would be up for renewal in 3 months. The temptation to market for termination was strong, but Sarah resisted. Revenge wasn't the goal, no matter how satisfying the fantasy. A soft noise drew her attention. Emma stood in the hallway, hair tousled from sleep. Mom, it's super late. Sarah smiled apologetically. Just finishing some work, sweetie. Did I wake you? Emma shook her head, padding over to examine the papers. Is this all for the mall? Yes. We take over officially after Thanksgiving. You need sleep too. Emma's matter-of-fact tone carried the wisdom children sometimes possess. Dr. Patel says rest is important for healing. You're right. Sarah gathered her daughter into a hug. 5 more minutes, then bed. Promise. After tucking Emma back in, Sarah returned to her work, this time focusing on her personal preparation. Elaine had emphasized the importance of perception needed to transform from struggling single mother to confident executive. Her calendar for tomorrow included a meeting with Janine, Elaine's image consultant. The appointment felt frivolous given everything else requiring attention. but Elaine had been insistent. Appearance shouldn't matter, but it does, she'd said. People judge competence on presentation, especially for women. Consider it armor for the battles ahead. The next morning, Janine assessed Sarah with a professional's objective eye. Your features are excellent, she declared. Strong bone structure, good proportions, but your presentation says overworked mom, not property director. The transformation began with hair. Sarah's unruly waves tamed into a sleek bob that framed her face. Next came a makeup lesson, focusing on subtle enhancement. Power isn't about looking pretty, Janine explained, it's about looking purposeful. The wardrobe consultation proved most challenging. Sarah had always prioritized function over fashion, especially during her financial struggles. Investment pieces, Janine advised, selecting tailored blazers, precisely fitted trousers, and dresses with architectural simplicity, quality over quantity. These clothes say you belong in the room where decisions happen. The total exceeded what Sarah had spent on herself in years. She hesitated before approving the purchases. Consider it business infrastructure, Janine said, sensing her reluctance. No different from fixing that roof you're worried about. By evening, Sarah hardly recognized herself in the mirror. The woman staring back projected quiet authority, someone who made decisions affecting others' livelihoods, someone who belonged in the executive suite. Emma's reaction proved most telling. She paused in the doorway, eyes widening. Mom, you look like those ladies on business magazine covers. Sarah laughed, suddenly self-conscious. Is it too much? Emma shook her head. No, you look strong. That night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah compiled her management team selections. Elaine had given her authority to bring in new personnel for key positions, though budget constraints meant keeping some existing staff. For head of security, she selected Marcus Johnson, a former police officer with community relations experience. For operations manager, Teresa Lindholm, whose resume showed a talent for efficiency without sacrificing quality. The marketing position remained open. Sarah wanted someone who understood the mall's community connections. Her phone chimed with a text from Elaine. Progress report. Sarah responded. Team nearly finalized. Infrastructure priorities established. Tenant strategy in development. Elaine's reply came quickly. Excellent. Remember our discussion about anchor tenants. The reminder referenced their ongoing debate about Westridge's largest spaces. Elaine favored traditional retail anchors, while Sarah advocated for diversification, perhaps a medical center in one wing, community college satellite campus in another. Sarah added the topic to their next meeting agenda, then returned to her tenant profiles. Each represented a business, but also people with aspirations, employees, and customers who depended on them, including Richard Mercer. His file included newspaper clippings about his store's opening 15 years ago, a young man with ambitious plans, describing his business as bringing affordable luxury to everyday people. Somewhere along the way, that vision had narrowed, become exclusive rather than inclusive. Perhaps, Sarah thought, there was potential for redemption for him. And for Westridge Mall itself, her phone rang unusual at nearly midnight. Emma's grandmother. Sarah, Emma's running a fever. 101.3. I'm on my way. Sarah was already grabbing her keys, heart racing. The reminder that some battles were more important than business. That Emma's health remained the true priority despite everything else demanding attention. In the hospital emergency room 2 hours later, Sarah held Emma's hand while doctors administered medication to bring down her fever. A setback, they assured her, not unexpected with this type of treatment. We'll need to keep her overnight for observation, Dr. Patel explained. Sarah nodded, settling into the familiar hospital chair. Her new business attire looked incongruous in this setting, a visual reminder of her dual responsibilities. As Emma finally drifted to sleep, Sarah opened her laptop. The mall planning could continue here. She would manage both roles, and executive, because failure in either was not an option. Her phone buzzed with a calendar alert. Westridge management transition 10 days. The countdown to confrontation had begun. Sarah stood before Westridge Mall's employee entrance, her reflection ghostly in the tinted glass. The November morning was crisp, fallen leaves swirling around her ankles as she took a steadying breath. First day jitters? Asked Teresa Lindholm, her newly hired operations manager. Something like that. Sarah smoothed her tailored blazer. adjusting the visitor badge clipped to her lapel, a temporary disguise until the official transition announcement later that morning. Inside the mall corridors were quiet, stores still an hour from opening. The maintenance staff nodded respectfully as Teresa introduced Sarah as the consultant from corporate. No recognition flickered in their eyes. Sarah's transformation was complete, her new haircut, professional attire, and confident posture, creating an effective disguise. Or perhaps they simply hadn't noticed her during her kiosk days. Invisibility worked both ways. Teresa led her through service corridors and back offices, introducing key personnel and highlighting operational concerns. Sarah noted everything, asking pointed questions while maintaining the fiction that this was her first thorough inspection of the property. "The roof issues are worse than reported," Teresa whispered as they examined water damage in a storage area. "Previous management deferred maintenance for 3 budget cycles. Make it priority 1, Sarah replied. "Schedule repairs to begin next week." They emerged into the main concourse, where early morning walkers circled the perimeter, mostly seniors, completing their daily exercise before the crowds arrived. Sarah recognized several regular customers who had frequented her kiosk, offering discounts for their small purchases and genuine interest in their lives. Mrs. Abernathy, who bought phone cases for each of her grandchildren every Christmas, walked past without a glance. Sarah felt a curious mixture of amusement and melancholy at her own invisibility. "Management offices are this way," Teresa continued, leading her toward the administrative suite where Sarah had once pleaded unsuccessfully for a lease extension. Inside, Sarah found the transition team already at work, Apex employees preparing for the ownership handover. Elaine had arrived earlier, handling the final paperwork with the outgoing management company. "All set?" Sarah asked, stepping into the temporary office assigned to her. "Signed and delivered," Elaine confirmed. "Westridge Mall is officially under Apex control, with you as property director." She handed Sarah a small velvet box, a tradition of mine. Inside lay a pair of small gold keys on a silver ring, symbolic rather than functional. "The keys to your kingdom," Elaine explained with a rare smile. "Though everything's electronic access now." Sarah closed her fingers around the cool metal. "Thank you for everything. You earned this," Elaine replied. "Now, are you ready for the tenant meeting?" At 9:30, store owners and managers began filing into the mall's community room for what they believed was a standard introduction to new management. Richard Mercer arrived fashionably late, his cashmere coat and designer briefcase broadcasting prosperity despite his store's declining sales. He took a seat near the front, exchanging knowing glances with several other luxury retailers. The division was evident high-end, store owners clustered together, separate from the small business operators who occupied inline spaces and kiosks. From a side room, Sarah watched through one-way glass, studying the dynamics. The room held 37 people representing Westridge's 42 businesses. Some appeared anxious, others indifferent. All were about to be surprised. Elaine began the presentation, introducing Apex Ventures and outlining the transition timeline. "Professional, reassuring," she projected stability and competence. "While I'll remain involved as Apex's representative," Elaine concluded, "day-to-day operations will be handled by our new property director, who brings unique insight into Westridge's potential." Sarah's moment had arrived. She straightened her spine, channeling the confidence she'd cultivated over the past months. "Showtime," she whispered, opening the door. Conversations halted as she walked to the podium. She felt Richard's eyes tracking her, sensing something familiar but not quite. Placing her. "Good morning," Sarah began, her voice steady. "I'm Sarah Donovan, your new property director." She made eye contact with each section of the room, deliberately ending with Richard, whose brow had furrowed in concentration. "Some of you may remember me," she continued. "Until recently, I operated a phone case kiosk near the north entrance." The reaction rippled through the room, confused murmurs, widening eyes, shifting postures. Richard's face drained of color as recognition dawned, followed immediately by poorly concealed alarm. "Yes, Mr. Mercer," Sarah acknowledged, directly addressing his unspoken shock. "Life takes unexpected turns." She allowed the moment to breathe, letting the implications settle across the room. "My unexpected turn brings me here today with a new vision for Westridge, one that values innovation, community connection, and mutual success." For the next 20 minutes, Sarah outlined her plans for revitalization, infrastructure improvements, marketing initiatives, and a new approach to tenant relationships. She emphasized collaboration rather than adversarial oversight, partnership rather than mere landlord-tenant transactions. Throughout, Richard remained rigid in his chair, eyes never leaving her face. The others alternated between taking notes and stealing glances at him, recognizing the sudden power shift. In your folders, you'll find our 90-day improvement plan, Sarah concluded. Individual meetings will be scheduled starting tomorrow to discuss your specific situations and how we can grow together. She paused, then added, success at Westridge will no longer be measured solely by rent per square foot, but by community impact, employee support, and sustainability. I believe there's room for all types of businesses here, from luxury retailers to innovative startups, if we align our vision. As the meeting adjourned, most tenants approached Sarah with cautious curiosity, sensing the winds of change. Richard hung back, visibly processing this reversal of fortune. When the room had nearly emptied, he finally approached, his practiced charm firmly in place. Ms. Donovan, he began, extending his hand. What an impressive development. I always said your business showed promise. Sarah accepted his handshake with professional courtesy, neither warm nor cold. Did you? I don't recall that particular feedback, Mr. Mercer. His smile tightened. Perhaps we should discuss my store's contribution to the mall's image over coffee sometime. Indeed, Sarah replied. Your lease renewal is coming up, I believe. We'll have plenty to discuss during your scheduled review. As Richard departed, visibly unsettled, Elaine joined Sarah at the podium. That, she said quietly, was masterfully handled. How does it feel? Sarah watched Richard's retreating figure, surprised by her own emotions. The anticipated satisfaction at his discomfort was present but muted, overshadowed by something unexpected, a sense of responsibility for the future of everyone who depended on Westridge for their livelihood. It feels like just the beginning, she answered. The mall management conference room had been transformed, this sterile corporate furniture replaced with a round table that eliminated hierarchical seating. Walls now displaying community photographs rather than sales charts. Sarah had made these changes deliberately, setting the stage for what would be the most challenging meeting of her new role. Her computer displayed security footage from the day of her eviction, a backup copy she'd requested from mall archives. On screen, a younger Sarah packed her inventory while Richard Mercer watched from his storefront, satisfaction evident in his posture. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Mr. Mercer is here for his 2 p.m., her assistant announced. Send him in, Sarah replied, closing the video file. Richard entered with the confident stride of someone accustomed to controlling rooms. His tailored suit and carefully casual pocket square projected successful businessman, though Sarah now recognized the subtle signs of financial strain. His watch was last year's model. His shoes showed professional repair rather than replacement. Sarah May, I call you Sarah. He began with practiced charm. I brought coffee. Latte, right. I remember you used to order these from the food court. The peace offering was transparent, as was his sudden recollection of her detail he would never have noticed 8 months ago. Thank you, Richard. She accepted the cup but set it aside. Please, have a seat. He settled across from her, immediately launching into a well-rehearsed speech about his boutique's prestigious history and contribution to the mall's upscale image. Sarah listened attentively, noting how he emphasized his community connections, while conveniently omitting his role in pushing out smaller businesses. Which is why I've always believed Westridge needed more exclusivity, he concluded. Quality over quantity, as I'm sure a businesswoman like yourself appreciates. Sarah allowed a moment of silence before responding. Interesting perspective. You signed the petition to remove my business on similar grounds, as I recall. Richard's smile flickered but held. A misunderstanding. The previous management encouraged us to consolidate retail space for efficiency. Nothing personal. Nothing personal, Sarah repeated. Let's discuss what was personal. Richard, she opened a folder containing his store's performance metrics. Your sales have declined 18% over 2 years. Foot traffic is down. Your customer demographic is aging without replacement by younger shoppers. His confidence visibly wavered. Temporary market conditions. Your lease expires in 90 days, Sarah continued calmly. Under normal circumstances, I would be evaluating whether renewal serves the mall's best interests. Richard leaned forward, alarm breaking through his composed facade. My store is an institution here. 15 years. Surely you wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Remove a struggling business. Ignore its pleas for consideration. Sarah's voice remained measured despite the quickening of her pulse, as was done to me. The implication hung between them. Richard's practiced charm collapsed entirely. Look, what happened to your kiosk was unfortunate, but business is business. You can't possibly hold that against me now. Business is business, Sarah agreed, though I view business differently than you apparently do. She slid a document across the table. This is our new tenant evaluation framework. Future leases and renewals will be assessed on 4 criteria: financial performance, community engagement, employee practices, and collaborative contribution. Richard scanned the document. Confusion evident. Collaborative contribution: how you support the mall ecosystem rather than just your individual store. Sarah pointed to specific metrics: mentoring smaller businesses, participating in community events, creating pathways for economic mobility. His expression shifted through multiple emotions: disbelief, indignation, calculation, and my lease renewal depends on these social factors. Partially, your rent structure will certainly be adjusted based on this evaluation. Richard's face darkened. That's extortion. No, Sarah corrected. It's values-aligned business. Something I learned during my own entrepreneurial journey when you contributed to cutting short. She stood, walking to the window overlooking the mall concourse below. When I started my kiosk, it wasn't some hobby. It was survival. My daughter Emma was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disorder. I'd lost my research position and health insurance. Those tacky phone cases you mocked, they paid for her medications. Richard shifted uncomfortably. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. You never asked. Sarah turned to face him. You saw only an eyesore threatening your concept of what belonged here, not a mother fighting for her child's life. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implication. Are you going to terminate my lease? Richard finally asked, vulnerability replacing his earlier arrogance. Is this your revenge? Sarah returned to her seat, studying him. The temptation to answer affirmatively, to watch him experience the same fear and uncertainty he'd helped inflict on her, was powerful. For a moment, she imagined the satisfaction of saying yes, of watching his carefully constructed world crumble as hers had. Instead, she pushed another document forward. This is a conditional lease renewal. Your base rent will triple. She held up her hand as he began to protest. Unless you meet the community impact targets outlined on page 3, achieve those, and your rent actually decreases from your current rate. Richard stared at her, comprehension dawning slowly. You're not evicting me. You reforming me. I'm offering you the choice I never received, Sarah corrected. Adapt to a new vision of retail community or find space elsewhere. But unlike you, I'm giving you the chance to evolve rather than simply removing what doesn't fit my personal aesthetic. She watched as he processed this unexpected turn, his expression cycling through shock, calculation, and finally, reluctant respect. Why? He asked finally. After what happened, why offer any opportunity at all? Sarah considered the question carefully. Because Westridge shouldn't be a battlefield of winners and losers. It should be a community where different businesses strengthen each other, even yours. Richard studied the agreement: professional assessment, replacing emotional reaction. These community targets: mentoring 3 small businesses, participating in monthly events, creating apprenticeship positions. They're substantial commitments. Yes, Sarah acknowledged. Precisely the kind of contribution that builds sustainable retail environments. The kind that might have helped my small business survive and grow alongside yours, rather than being seen as competition to eliminate. Their eyes met across the table, entrepreneur to entrepreneur, no longer merely victim and perpetrator, but to business people negotiating a possible future. I'll need to review this with my financial advisor, Richard said finally. Of course, you have 1 week to decide. Sarah stood, signaling the meeting's conclusion. For what it's worth, I think your business could thrive under this model. You have valuable expertise to share if you choose to. As Richard gathered his documents, his composure partially restored, he paused at the door. Your daughter's, better now. The unexpected inquiry caught Sarah off guard. She's responding to treatment. Every day is a battle. He nodded, something unreadable crossing his features. I'm glad to hear that. About the treatment. I mean, after he departed, Sarah remained at the conference table, surprised by the complex emotions swirling within her. The anticipated triumph of confrontation felt hollow compared to the unexpected potential of transformation, not just of the mall, but perhaps of Richard himself. Her phone chimed with a reminder. Emma's doctor appointment at 4 p.m. Some battles remained more important than others. The holiday season transformed Westridge Mall with twinkling lights and festive decorations, but the real transformation was happening beneath the surface. 6 weeks into Sarah's leadership, the property hummed with renewed energy. Construction crews repaired the long-neglected roof, while shoppers navigated cheerfully marked detours, enticed by special promotions from affected stores. In the central court, Sarah inspected the newly installed Community Impact Board, a digital display highlighting tenant contributions beyond mere sales figures, local sourcing percentages, charitable initiatives, employee development programs. Shoppers could vote for monthly impact awards, creating friendly competition around social responsibility. Brilliant idea, commented Teresa, joining her inspection. The engagement metrics are impressive. Dwell time up 20% in this area. Sarah nodded, watching shoppers stop to interact with the display. Any pushback from tenants? Initially from the usual suspects, but when Riverdale Coffee House saw their foot traffic jump after their literacy program feature, others started scrambling to get on the board. The system Sarah had designed was deceptively simple. Each business received a community impact score determining their rent structure. Higher scores meant lower rates, creating financial incentives for positive contributions. Transparent metrics meant everyone understood the rules, unlike the previous management's arbitrary decisions. And our friend Richard? Sarah asked, glancing toward the luxury wing. Teresa smiled. See for yourself. He's in the incubator space right now. The Westridge Incubator had been Sarah's first major initiative, converting vacant inline spaces into flexible pods where entrepreneurs could test concepts with minimal investment. Current tenants provided mentorship in exchange for impact points. Through the incubator's glass walls, Sarah spotted Richard demonstrating proper display lighting techniques to a young woman arranging handcrafted jewelry. His body language showed genuine engagement, quite different from the dismissive attitude he'd once shown towards smaller businesses. That's his second mentoring session this week, Teresa noted. Seems he's taking his impact score seriously. After their confrontational meeting, Sarah had expected Richard to simply pay the higher rent or relocate. Instead, he had surprised her by embracing the new system with unexpected enthusiasm. His lease renewal had been signed with all community commitments intact. Ms. Donovan, a hesitant voice, interrupted her thoughts. Sarah turned to find Gabriela Martinez, who operated a small alterations kiosk. Good morning, Gabriela. How's business? Very good, thank you. Gabriela's expression brightened. The holiday rush is keeping me busy, and the new location near the food court brings more visibility. Sarah had prioritized relocating service-oriented kiosks to high-traffic areas, reversing the previous management's practice of hiding them in low-visibility corridors. I wanted to ask about the small business expansion grant, Gabriela continued. Is it true anyone can apply? Absolutely. The application period opens next week. Are you thinking of expanding your services? Gabriela nodded eagerly. My daughter designs children's clothes. We've talked about combining our skills to offer custom pieces. With the grant, we could purchase the equipment we need. That sounds perfect for the program. Teresa can get you the details. As Gabriela departed with Teresa, Sarah continued her walkthrough, noting occupancy improvements and customer patterns. The mall still faced challenges. One anchor space remained vacant, and the north entrance renovation had encountered unexpected structural issues. But overall, Westridge showed promising vital signs. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Lab results came back. Dr. P says cautiously optimistic, whatever that means. Can I get a pretzel when I visit today? Sarah smiled, typing back, absolutely, cinnamon sugar or regular. Emma's response was immediate. Both, obviously. I'm a growing girl with an improving immune system. Sarah's heart lightened. Emma's health improvements paralleled Westridge's revitalization, small victories accumulating into meaningful progress. The new treatment protocol was working, though recovery remained a long road. Near the luxury wing, Sarah noticed Richard exiting the incubator space, deep in conversation with his jewelry-making mentee. He spotted Sarah and, after a moment's hesitation, approached with his companion. Sarah, this is Amara Williams. he introduced, remarkable talent with metalwork. I've suggested she consider a holiday pop-up to test market response. I've seen your pieces in the incubator showcase, Sarah told Amara. Beautiful craftsmanship. Thank you, Amara replied. Richard's been incredibly helpful with pricing strategy and display techniques, things I never considered. After Amara excused herself, an awkward silence fell between Sarah and Richard. This mentoring arrangement, he said finally. I initially viewed it as merely transactional points to lower my rent. But I'm finding it unexpectedly satisfying. Sarah studied him, noting subtle changes in his demeanor. Teaching often reveals what we actually know versus what we think we know. Indeed, Richard hesitated, then continued. I've been in retail for 20 years, but I'd forgotten certain fundamentals. Working with these new entrepreneurs has been refreshing. Before Sarah could respond, her phone rang. Emma's school. She excused herself to answer. Miss Donovan, this is Nurse Franklin. Emma's feeling dizzy and running a low-grade fever. Nothing severe, but given her condition, I'll be right there, Sarah promised. As she gathered her things to leave, Richard approached again. Is everything all right? You look concerned. The question seemed genuinely concerned rather than performatively polite. My daughter isn't feeling well. I need to pick her up from school. Richard nodded. Family comes first. I remember when my son had chronic migraines in middle school. Terrifying every time the school called. This personal revelation surprised Sarah. In all their previous interactions, Richard had never mentioned family. I didn't know you had children, she said. Just the one. He's in college now. Something unreadable crossed Richard's features. His mother has primary custody. The business demanded too much of my time for proper parenting. According to the divorce settlement, the glimpse of personal vulnerability shifted something in their dynamic, a reminder that everyone carried private battles beneath professional facades. I hope Emma feels better, Richard offered as Sarah departed. At school, Sarah found Emma pale but alert, her customary spirit evident despite her fatigue. False alarm, Emma insisted as they walked to the car. Just needed an excuse to score. That pretzel early. Nice try, Sarah replied, feeling her forehead. But you're definitely warm. Doctor first, then pretzels, if you're up to it. Dr. Patel confirmed a minor infection, an expected challenge for Emma's compromised immune system. Additional medication was prescribed, and they were sent home with monitoring instructions later. As Emma rested on the couch with her hard-won pretzel, doctor proved as a morale booster. Sarah reviewed Westridge's daily reports remotely. The mall's vital signs remained positive despite her absence, a testament to the systems she'd put in place and the team she'd assembled. Her phone buzzed with an email notification from an unexpected sender, Richard Mercer. The subject line read simply, Community Impact Proposal. The message outlined a concept for a retail skills workshop, where established store owners would train high school students in business fundamentals, offering internship opportunities to program graduates. Richard had already secured tentative participation from 5 other luxury retailers, traditionally the most resistant to community initiatives. This could address our shared workforce development goals while creating pipeline talent for all stores, his message concluded. I'd appreciate your thoughts when convenient. No rush, focus on your daughter first. Sarah reread the proposal, struck by its thoughtfulness and practical approach. This wasn't merely point-chasing behavior but a genuine contribution that leveraged Richard's expertise. Who's that from? Emma asked sleepily from the couch. You're making your surprised face. Someone I used to think I had figured out, Sarah replied. Turns out people can surprise you. Emma nodded sagely. Like when Ms. Peterson gave us extra recess even though Jaden knocked over the ant farm. People contain multitudes. Sarah laughed. Where did you hear that expression, Grandma? She says people deserve second chances because everyone's fighting battles you can't see. Emma took another bite of pretzel. Is this about that watch guy who was mean to you? Sarah nodded, surprised by her daughter's perception. Maybe he's sorry, Emma suggested. Or maybe he's still a jerk but doing nice things for jerky reasons. She shrugged. Either way, if it helps other people, does it matter? Out of the mouths of babes. Sarah thought for the second time since beginning this journey. She began typing a response to Richard's proposal, her perspective shifting once again. The January management meeting began cordially enough. Sarah's first quarter results had exceeded projections. Foot traffic, up 17%. vacancy rates down, and holiday sales stronger than the previous 3 years. The mood around the conference table should have been celebratory. Should have been. While these improvements are noteworthy, drawled Frederick Hamilton of Hamilton's Fine Leather, some of us have concerns about the direction of Westridge Mall. Sarah maintained her professional composure, though inwardly she'd been expecting this. Frederick, whose store occupied prime space near the main entrance, had been among those most resistant to her community impact system. What specific concerns, Frederick? She asked, keeping her tone neutral. This, social engineering. He gestured dismissively toward the quarterly report. Forcing established businesses to participate in community programs or face punitive rent increases. It's fundamentally changing the character of our shopping environment. Several other luxury retailers nodded in agreement. Sarah noted that Richard Mercer, surprisingly, was not among them. He sat quietly, expression unreadable. The community impact system isn't punitive, Sarah corrected. It's incentive-based. Businesses choosing not to participate simply pay market rate rent instead of receiving discounts. Semantics, scoffed Diane Merrick of Glamour Cosmetics. The reality is, we're being coerced into activities outside our core business models. Sarah took a measured breath. Research consistently shows that consumers, particularly younger demographics, prefer businesses with visible community engagement. We're simply aligning incentives with evolving market realities. Perhaps in budget retailers, Frederick countered. Our clientele expects exclusivity, not charity cases, setting up shop next door. The dismissive phrase echoed past attitudes. Toward her own small business, Sarah studied the faces around the table. The division was clear. Most small and mid-sized retailers appeared supportive or neutral, while a faction of high-end stores radiated resistance. The results speak for themselves, Sarah replied, highlighting key metrics. Every category of retailer has seen increased sales since implementation, including luxury goods. The meeting concluded without resolution, the undercurrent of discontent palpable. As attendees filtered out, Teresa lingered behind. That went about as expected, she murmured. Hamilton's been organizing resistance since December. They've had several after-hours meetings at his store. I'm aware, Sarah replied. Security noted the gatherings on evening reports. What Teresa didn't know was that Sarah had anticipated this backlash from the beginning. Change never came without resistance, especially when it challenged established power structures. Later that afternoon, Marcus Johnson, head of security, requested an urgent meeting. We have a situation, he reported, closing Sarah's office door. Hamilton and his group have been approaching other tenants, suggesting they withhold January's rent payment as protest against the new policies. Sarah frowned. Do we know how many are considering participation? At least 7, possibly more. They're being cautious. But one of the store managers tipped us off, apparently uncomfortable with the tactic. A coordinated rent strike could create significant cash flow problems, especially with the North Wing renovations still underway. Sarah had expected opposition, but not this level of organized resistance. There's more, Marcus continued. They're preparing a formal complaint to Apex's board, claiming your personal history with certain tenants constitutes a conflict of interest in management decisions. The implication was clear. They were attempting to undermine her authority by painting her policies as revenge rather than sound business strategy. Who's leading this beyond Hamilton? Sarah asked. Diane Merrick is heavily involved. Also James Chen from Dynasty Jewelers. Marcus hesitated. Interestingly, Richard Mercer was invited to their strategy session, but declined participation. That detail caught Sarah's attention. Richard's absence from the resistance was unexpected given their history. Keep monitoring this situation, she instructed. No direct confrontation yet. I need to consider our response carefully. After Marcus departed, Sarah reviewed the lease agreements for the dissenting stores. Each contained standard provisions regarding timely payment and collective action. The legal position was clear, but enforcement could prove divisive and potentially damaging to the mall's fragile recovery. Her phone chimed with a text from Emma. Blood work all good today. Can I please do the sleepover at Zoe's on Friday? Dr. P says my immune system can handle normal kid stuff now. The message provided welcome perspective. Whatever challenges arose at Westridge, they paled compared to Emma's battle and her daughter's. Improving health was the ultimate victory. If Dr. P approves, then yes, Sarah replied. But full medication schedule, and call me if anything feels off. Emma's response came immediately. Yes. First sleepover in 8 months. We'll be super responsible. Promise, promise, promise. Sarah smiled, despite her concerns about the mall situation. Emma's excitement was a powerful reminder of what truly mattered. The following morning, Sarah arrived early to find Teresa waiting with new information. Hamilton's group submitted their rent payments last night, she reported with evident confusion. All of them. The strike appears to have been cancelled. Sarah frowned. Did they provide any explanation? None. But there's something else. Teresa handed her a folder. These arrived addressed to you personally. Inside, Sarah found formal withdrawal letters from the complaint being prepared for Apex's board. Each store owner had independently rescinded their participation in the action against her leadership. This makes no sense, Teresa said. Yesterday they were organizing against you. Today, they're backing down completely. Sarah studied the letters, equally puzzled by the sudden reversal. Did security observe any unusual activity overnight? Nothing significant, though. Teresa checked her notes. Richard Mercer's store lights were on late, and he received multiple visitors after closing, including Hamilton and Merrick. The pieces began falling into place. Interesting. Have Mercer's visitors submitted withdrawal letters? Teresa nodded. All of them. Sarah leaned back, processing this development. Schedule a meeting with Richard for this afternoon. I want to understand what happened. Richard arrived precisely on time, impeccably dressed as always, though Sarah detected subtle signs of fatigue around his eyes. You wanted to see me? He asked, taking the offered seat. I'm curious about last night's activities. Sarah replied directly. Specifically, why Hamilton's resistance movement suddenly collapsed. Richard maintained a neutral expression. Perhaps they reconsidered the business implications of their actions. Perhaps, Sarah agreed. Or perhaps someone convinced them that opposing the new direction was counterproductive. Their eyes met in silent acknowledgement. Hypothetically, Richard said carefully, if someone were to point out that your policies have objectively improved business conditions for everyone, including those complaining the loudest, that might influence reconsideration. Hypothetically, Sarah continued. If that same someone shared data demonstrating that community impact participation correlates with increased sales across all price points, that might be persuasive. A ghost of a smile crossed Richard's features. Purely hypothetically, of course. Sarah studied him, genuinely curious. Why would you defend policies that initially seemed contrary to your interests? Richard considered the question carefully. Because good business isn't just about individual success, it's about creating environments where everyone can thrive. He straightened his tie. A lesson I'm still learning, admittedly. As he departed, Sarah remained thoughtful. The resistance had been diffused, at least temporarily, by an unlikely ally. Whether Richard's intervention stemmed from genuine conversion to her vision, or simply pragmatic business calculation remained unclear. Either way, an important corner had been turned at Westridge Mall. The vibration of her phone jolted Sarah awake. 3:17 a.m. Emma's grandmother. Sarah, it's happening again. The fear in her mother's voice sent ice through Sarah's veins. The fever spiked suddenly. She's asking for you. I'm on my way. Sarah was already moving, muscle memory guiding her through the familiar emergency room clothes, purse, keys, medical records folder. The hospital emergency room recognized Emma immediately. They'd been here too many times in the past year, the staff greeting them with the grim efficiency reserved for regular patients. Temps 103.8, the nurse reported as they transferred Emma to a bed. Doctors ordered blood cultures and broad-spectrum antibiotics. Emma looked small against the white sheets, her face flushed with fever, strawberry blonde hair dark with sweat. At 13, she straddled the line between child and teenager, but illness temporarily erased her growing independence. Mom, she whispered, reaching out, it hurts again. I know, baby. The medicine will help soon. Sarah squeezed her hand, projecting a calm she didn't feel. Dr. Patel arrived quickly, his face grave as he reviewed the initial readings. This is concerning. Her white count is significantly elevated. But she was improving, Sarah protested. The new treatment, autoimmune conditions can be unpredictable, he reminded her gently, and immunosuppressive therapies leave patients vulnerable to secondary infections. The next hours passed in the familiar blur of tests, consultations, and mounting anxiety. Morning found Sarah slumped in the bedside chair, watching Emma's fitful sleep while responding to urgent work emails on her phone. Teresa could handle the mall operations temporarily, but several situations required Sarah's input: the contractor dispute over the north entrance renovations, final approval for the spring marketing campaign, the anchor tenant negotiations for the vacant department store space. Sarah rubbed her eyes, toggling between hospital anxiety and professional responsibility. The past months had stretched her capacity for compartmentalization to its limits. By noon, Emma's fever had stabilized, though she remained lethargic and uncomfortable. The preliminary diagnosis, a serious kidney infection, possibly exacerbated by her immunosuppressive medications. "We need to admit her," Dr. Patel explained, "at least for a few days of her antibiotics and close monitoring." Sarah nodded, already calculating how to reorganize her schedule. The mall's quarterly board presentation was tomorrow. Impossible to reschedule given Apex executives' travel arrangements. "I'll stay tonight," her mother offered, sensing Sarah's dilemma. "You can go home, shower, prepare for your meeting. Then we'll trade places." "I can't leave her," Sarah protested, though her professional responsibilities weighed heavily. Emma, drifting in and out of alertness, squeezed her hand. "Go do boss stuff, Mom. Grandma will read me the boring parts of her mystery novels until I fall asleep." Sarah smiled, despite her worry. "Are you sure?" "Positive. Besides, I'm mostly going to sleep. These meds make me super drowsy." Emma's attempt at reassurance was undermined by her obvious discomfort. After extracting promises of immediate updates for any change, Sarah reluctantly departed for a brief return to Westridge. The mall was holding its first Community Impact Showcase, highlighting tenant initiatives and their local benefits. Her presence, even briefly, seemed important for morale. The central court had been transformed with displays featuring each store's community contributions, scholarship programs, sustainability initiatives, local sourcing commitments. Shoppers engaged with interactive elements while store representatives explained their projects. Sarah noted with approval that participation was nearly universal, including most of the previously resistant luxury retailers. Even Frederick Hamilton's leather goods store featured a display about their apprenticeship program for disadvantaged youth, a recent initiative that coincidentally improved their community impact score. "Impressive turnout," Teresa commented, joining her survey. "The local media coverage has been excellent too." Sarah nodded absently, her thoughts repeatedly returning to Emma's hospital room. "How's your daughter?" Teresa asked, noticing her distraction. "Stable but admitted for treatment. I need to return soon." Sarah forced her attention to immediate mall matters. "Any issues requiring immediate decisions?" "Nothing that can't wait," Teresa assured her. "Though Richard Mercer was asking about you earlier, seemed concerned when I mentioned a family emergency." Sarah made a mental note to follow up later. Her tentative alliance with Richard remained professionally valuable, if personally complicated. After reviewing critical documents and recording a welcome message for the showcase's evening reception, Sarah prepared to return to the hospital. As she gathered her things, her assistant announced an unexpected visitor. Richard Mercer stood in her doorway, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I heard your daughter is ill," he said without preamble. "I don't mean to intrude, but ... double quotes." He held out a small gift bag. "When my son was hospitalized years ago, certain things made the experience less terrible." Surprised, Sarah accepted the package. Inside was a soft throw blanket in cheerful blue, a high-quality portable phone charger, and an audiobook gift card. "Hospital blankets are always inadequate," Richard explained awkwardly, "and outlets never seem to be where you need them. The audiobooks helped my son when he was too tired to read but bored with television." The thoughtfulness of the gifts, clearly chosen from personal experience, caught Sarah completely off guard. "Thank you," she said, genuinely moved, but unexpectedly kind. Richard shifted uncomfortably. "It's nothing, really." He hesitated, then added, "If you need schedule flexibility in the coming days, several of us store owners could assist with the showcase events. Teresa has our contact information." The offer of support from the man who had once led the charge to remove her from the mall seemed to crystallize the transformation of their professional relationship. "I appreciate that," Sarah replied. "Truly." As Richard turned to leave, Sarah found herself asking, why the change? Richard, from leading the petition against my kiosk to ... this. He considered the question carefully. "When my son was ill, my business obsession meant I wasn't there as often as I should have been." His mother never forgave me, rightfully so, His expression reflected old regrets. Your situation reminded me of those misplaced priorities. The personal revelation shifted something in Sarah's perception of him, not excusing past actions, but contextualizing them within a more complex human story. I hope Emma recovers quickly, he added simply. Family comes first, something I learned too late. At the hospital, Sarah found Emma's fever finally responding to treatment. Though complete recovery would take time, she arranged the soft blanket around her daughter's shoulders, earning a weak but grateful smile. Nice upgrade, Emma murmured, snuggling into the plush fabric. Hospital chic. A gift, Sarah explained, from someone I used to consider an enemy. Emma considered this through medication-induced drowsiness. Plot twist, she whispered before drifting back to sleep. Indeed, Sarah thought, watching her daughter's peaceful breathing. The storyline she had imagined, a simple tale of revenge and justice, had evolved into something more nuanced. The clear boundaries between allies and adversaries had blurred, revealing the complex humanity behind business relationships. Her phone chimed with updates from Teresa. The showcase proceeding successfully. Community engagement exceeding expectations. Media coverage highlighting Westridge's transformation from traditional mall to community hub. Small victories accumulating into meaningful change, Sarah thought, for the mall, for her career, and most importantly, for Emma, whose monitors now showed improving vital signs. The most significant turning point of all, the hospital released Emma after 5 days of intensive treatment. Her infection had responded to antibiotics, though recovery would require continued vigilance and medication adjustments. Sarah brought her home to an apartment transformed by small touches from Westridge's community. Flowers from the mall's garden shop, healthy meal deliveries coordinated by Teresa, and handmade cards from the children's art program participants. You're like a mall celebrity now, Emma observed, arranging the cards on her nightstand. It's weird, but kind of cool. Sarah smiled, adjusting Emma's pillows. Rest now. Doctor's orders. I've been resting for days, Emma protested, though her lingering fatigue was evident. Tell me about work instead. Any dramatic developments in the soap opera of retail politics? Sarah had kept mall updates light during Emma's hospitalization, focusing on amusing customer anecdotes rather than business challenges. Now, sitting beside her recovering daughter, she shared more substantive news. The Community Impact Showcase was a success. Local media coverage generated our highest weekend traffic in 2 years, and the meanies who tried to sabotage you. Sarah smiled at Emma's straightforward characterization. Surprisingly cooperative lately, even helping with events while I was at the hospital with you. Emma considered this, twirling a strand of hair, a habitual gesture when processing information. People can change, I guess. Like in those Christmas movies where the grumpy businessman learns to love puppies and snow. Something like that, Sarah agreed, though the reality was more complex than holiday movie redemption arcs. The transformation at Westridge reflected shifting incentives rather than miraculous character changes. When community engagement became financially advantageous, even the most resistant tenants discovered their social conscience. Yet Sarah had noticed genuine evolution in some, particularly Richard, whose support during Emma's hospitalization seemed motivated by something beyond strategic positioning. Get some sleep, she told Emma, kissing her forehead. I'll work from home today, so I'm here if you need anything. Emma was already drifting off, the medication making her drowsy. Love you, Mom. You're winning at everything. Sarah watched her daughter sleep, thinking how differently winning looked from what she had initially imagined. Her revenge fantasy making Richard and others suffer as she had evolved into something more meaningful, creating a system where everyone could succeed through cooperation rather than competition. The following day, with Emma feeling stronger and Sarah's mother available to help, Sarah returned to the mall for critical meetings. The renovated north entrance would reopen next week, and the vacant anchor space finally had promising prospects. A regional medical center, considering a satellite facility that would bring daily traffic to that wing. As she walked the concourse, Sarah noted small but significant improvements throughout the property. Retailers who had once competed now cross-promoted, recognizing their interdependence. The incubator spaces hosted a rotating showcase of local artisans. The food court featured cooking demonstrations from various cultural traditions, reflecting the community's diversity. Approaching her office, Sarah found Richard waiting in the reception area, a leather portfolio under his arm. Do you have a moment? He asked, rising as she approached. There's something I'd like to discuss. In her office, Richard seemed uncharacteristically hesitant, arranging and rearranging papers before speaking. How is Emma recovering? He began. Better, thank you. She's home now. Resting. Richard nodded. Good. That's good. He took a deep breath. I've been thinking about our history, the role I played in difficult circumstances for you and your daughter. Sarah remained silent, allowing him space to continue. I led that petition against your kiosk, he acknowledged, not because your business threatened mine in any meaningful way, but because it didn't fit my vision of what Westridge should be: exclusive, high-end, catering to a specific clientele. He met her eyes directly. I was wrong, not just ethically, but strategically. The mall's strength comes from its diversity, not its exclusivity. The frank admission surprised Sarah. What brought this realization? Partly your leadership, demonstrating how different businesses can strengthen each other. Partly self-reflection. Richard hesitated. And partly my son. He opened his portfolio, removing a news article printout. Julian recently wrote this for his college newspaper. Sarah accepted the paper, noting the headline, Retail Revitalization, Community-Based Approaches to Shopping Center Renaissance. He's studying urban planning and business, Richard explained. When I mentioned the changes at Westridge, he wanted to feature it as a case study. His expression softened with evident pride. He specifically highlighted the community impact system as an innovative approach to retail sustainability. Sarah scanned the article, impressed by its thoughtful analysis. He's a talented writer. He is, Richard agreed, and reading his assessment made me realize how my previous approach contradicted not just your vision, but my son's values. He looked away briefly. I've been trying to rebuild our relationship since the divorce. Finding common ground has been challenging. The personal context added depth to Richard's professional evolution, suggesting motivations beyond simple business calculation. I appreciate your candor, Sarah said, but I'm curious why you're sharing this now. Richard straightened, his manner becoming more businesslike. Because I have a proposal. He removed additional documents from his portfolio. Several of us, myself, Chen from Dynasty Jewelers, even Hamilton, have been discussing ways to expand the community impact approach. The proposal outlined a comprehensive health initiative. Participating stores would contribute to a fund supporting families facing medical crises, with special emphasis on children's treatments not fully covered by insurance. We'd coordinate with local hospitals to identify needs, Richard explained, and provide both financial assistance and practical support: transportation, meals, childcare for siblings during hospital visits. Sarah studied the document, noting the detailed implementation plan and substantial initial funding commitments. This is thorough. We've been working on it since Emma's hospitalization, Richard admitted. Many of us have experienced family medical issues. We understand the challenges extend beyond financial concerns. The initiative represented more than strategic business positioning. It reflected genuine community investment from retailers, previously focused solely on individual success. I'd like your input before we finalize anything, Richard concluded. Given your personal experience navigating the medical system with Emma, Sarah considered the proposal, its potential impact, and the remarkable evolution it represented. When she had returned to Westridge's management, she had anticipated resistance, perhaps eventual acceptance of her authority. She had not expected genuine collaboration, especially from those who had once engineered her removal. I think it has tremendous potential, she said finally, with some refinements based on practical experience. Richard looked relieved. We were hoping you'd say that your perspective would be invaluable. As they discussed implementation details, Sarah reflected on her mother's wisdom, shared with Emma, and now echoing back. People deserve second chances, because everyone's fighting battles you can't see. Richard's battle included regret over prioritizing business above family, strained relationships, and perhaps the recognition that success measured solely in sales figures left something essential unfulfilled. There's one more thing, Richard said as their meeting concluded. Julian's coming home next weekend. I'd like him to meet you to understand the real story behind the case study. The invitation represented another kind of olive branch, personal rather than professional. Acknowledging the human dimensions of their business relationship. I'd be happy to meet him, Sarah replied. Perhaps Emma could join us if she's feeling up to it. She's developed strong opinions about retail management for a 13-year-old, Richard smiled. Julian would probably enjoy that. He was quite opinionated at that age too. As Richard departed, Sarah felt the subtle but definitive closing of one chapter and opening of another. The narrative had shifted from adversaries to cautious allies to something approaching collegiality. Her phone chimed with a text from Emma. Feeling better. Can I please come to the mall tomorrow? Dying to see the changes you've been talking about. Sarah smiled, typing back, if you're up for it. Short visit only. Emma's response came immediately. Yes, we'll wear mask and everything. Best mom ever. Tomorrow, Sarah would show her daughter the transformed Westridge, not just its physical improvements, but the evolving relationships and community connections that represented the mall's true revitalization. And perhaps, in that tour, Emma would recognize that her mother's journey had been about something more profound than revenge or professional validation. It had become about creating spaces where people could grow beyond past limitations, including Sarah herself. Spring transformed Westridge Mall's exterior with flowering trees and fresh landscaping, mirroring the property's internal revitalization. 6 months into Sarah's leadership, occupancy had reached 92%, the highest in 5 years. The community impact system had become a case study in retail management journals, and 3 regional malls had inquired about implementing similar models. In the newly renovated community room, Sarah observed the inaugural meeting of the Westridge Health Initiative Committee. Store owners who had once barely acknowledged each other now collaborated around a conference table, discussing fundraising strategies and family support systems. Richard presided as committee chair. Having emerged as an unexpected champion for the cause, his organizational skills and business connections had accelerated the initiative's development. The hospital partnership is confirmed, he announced to the group. They'll help identify families needing assistance and provide space for our support programs. Sarah noted the transformation in his demeanor, the former arrogance replaced by purposeful collaboration. He still dressed impeccably, still carried himself with confidence, but something fundamental had shifted in his approach to others. What about the fundraising gala? Asked James Chen from Dynasty Jewelers, once Richard's ally in opposition to Sarah's policies. Scheduled for June, Richard confirmed. Sarah has secured the central court at no cost, and several restaurants have committed to catering donations. The meeting continued with remarkable efficiency, each retailer contributing according to their strengths. Frederick Hamilton offering his leather shop for creating commemorative donor gifts, the bookstore owner arranging author appearances, the technology store planning interactive displays. Sarah contributed where needed but intentionally remained in a supporting role, allowing the tenant-led initiative to develop its own momentum. Ownership without micromanagement, a leadership principle Elaine had emphasized during Sarah's training. As the meeting concluded, Teresa pulled Sarah aside with urgent news. Malcorp just announced plans for Crystal Point, she reported, referring to a long-rumored luxury shopping center, breaking ground in 60 days, less than 3 miles from West. Sarah frowned. Crystal Point had been theoretical for years, a planned high-end retail destination targeting exactly the demographic Westridge had struggled to attract under previous management. Their advertising lease rates 20% below market. Teresa continued, clearly hoping to poach established tenants, including ours, Sarah concluded. The timing was particularly challenging, with many Westridge leases approaching renewal in the coming months. Later that afternoon, Sarah convened an emergency meeting with her management team to assess the threat. Crystal Point is positioning as exclusive luxury retail, Marcus reported. Their marketing materials specifically mention carefully curated tenancy and premium shopping experience, buzzwords designed to appeal to high-end retailers, like half our luxury wing, Teresa added grimly. Sarah studied the preliminary renderings of the competing property, glass and steel architecture, valet, parking, concierge services. The development represented exactly the model Westridge had abandoned under her leadership in favor of community integration and diverse retail mix. They're targeting our most profitable tenants, Sarah acknowledged. Richard Hamilton, Dynasty Jewelers all would fit their tenant profile. Initial outreach has already begun, Marcus confirmed. Several owners mentioned receiving promotional materials and invitations to exclusive preview events. The potential damage extended beyond lost rental income. If key luxury retailers departed, Westridge's carefully balanced ecosystem could destabilize, undermining the community-based revitalization strategy. Options. Sarah asked. The team outlined possible responses. McChinn's Crystal Point's reduced lease rates financially unsustainable, accelerating planned amenity improvements insufficient to offset the appeal of a brand new facility, or shifting focus entirely away from luxury retail, abandoning significant investments. None seemed adequate to counter the immediate threat. I need time to consider our approach, Sarah concluded. Meanwhile, schedule meetings with our most vulnerable tenants. Let's understand their concerns directly. That evening, reviewing Crystal Point's detailed prospectus in her office, Sarah recognized a fundamental challenge. The competing development offered exactly what Richard and other luxury retailers had initially wanted Westridge to become: exclusive, upscale, catering to affluent customers without the messy inns of diverse retail environments. Would the community connections built over recent months prove stronger than the appeal of Crystal Point's gleaming newness and exclusivity? A knock interrupted her thoughts. Richard stood in the doorway, Crystal Point's marketing materials in hand. I assume you've seen these, he said, entering without waiting for invitation. Yes, Sarah acknowledged. Impressive development. Richard sat across from her, expression unreadable. They contacted me yesterday, offering a corner location, significant build-out allowance, and first-year rent at 40% below my current rate. The aggressive incentives confirmed Sarah's fears. Malcorp clearly intended to establish Crystal Point's luxury credentials by poaching Westridge's most prestigious tenants. Compelling offer, she said neutrally. Very. Richard studied her. I assume others received similar proposals. Sarah nodded, maintaining professional composure. Despite the potential crisis unfolding, if Richard departed for Crystal Point, others would likely follow, triggering a cascade of defections. What are you planning to do? She asked directly. Richard considered the question. That depends on Westridge's response to this competitive threat. Crystal Point offers certain advantages: new construction, targeted marketing to luxury consumers, exclusivity, all things you advocated for Westridge before our current direction, Sarah noted. True, Richard acknowledged, which puts me in an interesting position. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them, the progress of recent months suddenly overshadowed by business realities. Sarah had experienced enough retail cycles to know how quickly fortunes could reverse. Tenant loyalty extended only as far as financial self-interest allowed. I've scheduled individual meetings with potentially affected tenants, Sarah said finally. Yours is tomorrow at 10, if that works for your calendar. Richard stood, straightening his jacket. Tomorrow at 10 is fine, but perhaps we should consider a different approach. Different how? Instead of individual meetings, what about bringing concerned tenants together? Addressing the threat collectively rather than negotiating separate accommodations. The suggestion surprised Sarah. You think that would be productive? I think Westridge's strength comes from its community, not its individual stores, Richard replied, echoing her own philosophy. If we face this challenge in isolation, Crystal Point wins by default. The proposal represented a remarkable evolution from the man who had once organized resistance against her leadership. Now he suggested collaborative problem-solving rather than competitive positioning. That's worth considering, Sarah agreed. Can you help coordinate attendance? Richard nodded. I'll make some calls tonight. We should include everyone, not just luxury retailers. This affects the entire ecosystem. As he departed, Sarah reflected on the unexpected alliance. When she had returned to Westridge as director, revenge had seemed a straightforward objective. Make those who had hurt her experience similar pain. Reality had proven more complex, with former adversaries becoming allies and simple narratives giving way to nuanced relationships. Whatever Crystal Point represented as a business threat, it had revealed something valuable about Westridge's transformation. The community connections were real, not merely strategic positioning. Her phone chimed with a text from Emma. Just saw news about that fancy new mall online. Are the snobs going to abandon ship? Sarah smiled at her daughter's blunt assessment, typing back, we'll see. Westridge has something they can't easily replicate. Emma's response came quickly. Yeah, you, duh. From the mouths of babes, Sarah thought for the third time. Sometimes the simplest perspective cut through complexity to essential truth. The community room hummed with anxious energy as Westridge's store owners assembled. Rather than the usual division between luxury retailers and smaller businesses, the seating had spontaneously integrated a visual representation of the mall's evolution under Sarah's leadership. Richard arrived early. conferring quietly with several other owners before taking a seat near the front. His involvement in organizing this meeting had surprised Sarah, though she remained cautious about his ultimate intentions regarding Crystal Point's overtures. "Quite the turnout," Teresa whispered as Sarah surveyed the room. 47 owners present. Sarah nodded, noting the mix of expressions: concern, curiosity, determination. The Crystal Point threat had created an unexpected unity among previously factional tenants. "Thank you all for coming," Sarah began, standing before the assembled group. "I assume everyone's heard about the Crystal Point A development." Murmurs of confirmation rippled through the room. "Rather than address this individually, we're taking a community approach consistent with how we've transformed Westridge over the past months." Sarah outlined the competitive threat: Point's luxury positioning, aggressive lease incentives, and targeted recruitment of established retailers. No sugarcoating, no minimizing the potential impact. "I won't pretend this isn't serious," she concluded. "Crystal Point represents exactly what some of you wanted Westridge to become before our current direction. The question is whether their vision is more compelling than what we've built together." Richard stood, addressing the room with the authority his tenure at Westridge afforded him. "I've received their proposal, as I suspect many of you have." Nods confirmed his assumption. "The financial incentives are significant, but I've learned that business decisions based solely on short-term financial considerations often prove costly in other ways." He described the evolution of his perspective from initially resisting Sarah's community-based approach to recognizing its long-term value. "What we've created here goes beyond lease rates," Richard continued. "We've built an ecosystem where businesses support each other rather than merely coexisting, where customer loyalty extends beyond individual stores to the entire property." Frederick Hamilton rose next, his previous opposition to Sarah's policies seemingly forgotten. "My apprenticeship program was initially just about improving our community impact score," he admitted. "But it's become genuinely valuable both for the young people involved and for my business." One by one, retailers shared similar experiences: community connections that had started as strategic compliance but evolved into meaningful engagement. Gabriela Martinez, the Alterations Kiosk owner, spoke about her expanded business now incorporating her daughter's children's clothing designs. "This would never have happened at Crystal Point," she said firmly. "They wouldn't even consider a business like mine for their curated tenant mix." The testimonials continued, creating momentum toward a collective response. Sarah watched, deliberately allowing the store owners to drive the conversation rather than imposing her own solution. Eventually, James Chen from Dynasty Jewelers addressed the practical question. "Emotional connections aside, Crystal Point's financial incentives are compelling. How do we compete with 40% lease reductions?" "We don't," Sarah replied simply. "At least, not directly. Westridge can't match those rates and remain financially viable." The straightforward acknowledgement created momentary unease. "Instead," Sarah continued, "we need to reframe the competition entirely. Crystal Point is selling exclusivity and newness. We're offering something different: integration, diverse customer base, and proven success." She unveiled preliminary data from the past 6 months: customer retention rates, cross-shopping patterns, and most significantly, the correlation between community impact scores and sales performance. "The numbers are clear," Sarah explained. "Stores actively participating in our community initiatives show 23% higher sales growth than those with minimal engagement. That's a competitive advantage Crystal Point can't easily replicate." Richard rejoined the conversation. "What if we leverage that advantage more aggressively? Not just maintaining our current approach, but expanding it?" His suggestion sparked intense discussion. Store owners proposed various enhancements to the community model: expanded incubator spaces, joint marketing initiatives highlighting Westridge's unique character, and most significantly, a cooperative fund to support shared amenities benefiting all businesses. By meeting's end, a collaborative strategy had emerged, not denying Crystal Point's appeal for certain retailers, but strengthening Westridge's alternative vision. "We'll lose some tenants," Teresa acknowledged as the room gradually emptied. "That's inevitable." "Yes," Sarah agreed, "but we'll retain those who recognize the value we've created, and we'll attract others who share our vision." Richard remained behind, reviewing notes from the discussion. "Quite different from the resistance meetings I organized against you," he observed with ironic self-awareness. "Quite," Sarah agreed, "though the organizational skills remain impressive." He acknowledged the compliment with a slight nod. Crystal Point offered me their prime corner location. Reduced rent for 3 years. Substantial build-out allowance. A significant opportunity, Sarah noted, maintaining professional neutrality. Despite the potential impact of his departure, Richard studied her expression. "You're not going to try to convince me to stay. Would that work?" Sarah countered. "Business decisions should reflect your priorities, not my persuasion." His laugh held genuine amusement. "You've learned a lot since your kiosk days." "I had effective teachers," Sarah replied, "some offering positive examples, others demonstrating approaches to avoid." The veiled reference to their history hung between them, acknowledged but no longer divisive. "I've decided to decline Crystal Point's offer," Richard said finally. "My customers know where to find me, and the relationships I've built here have value beyond financial incentives." The decision surprised Sarah despite the collaborative spirit he'd demonstrated recently. Richard's luxury watch boutique represented exactly the type of business Crystal Point targeted: established, high-end, catering to affluent customers. "May I ask why?" she inquired. Richard considered the question carefully. 20 years ago, I opened my store with a simple mission, bringing accessible luxury to everyday people. Somewhere along the way, I became fixated on exclusivity instead." He gestured toward the community room, where they'd just met. "This approach aligns more closely with my original vision." The explanation seemed genuine, reflecting the evolution Sarah had observed in his business philosophy. "Besides," Richard added with unexpected candor, "I've made enough mistakes prioritizing short-term business advantages over long-term human connections. My son helped me recognize that pattern. I'm trying to break it." As Richard departed, Sarah remained thoughtful. Crystal Point still posed a significant threat. Some defections were inevitable, and the transition period would challenge Westridge's financial stability. But something important had been revealed in today's meeting. The community they'd built had genuine value beyond economic incentives. Her phone chimed with a message from Elaine. "Heard about Crystal Point's situation. Need damage assessment and strategic response by tomorrow." Sarah began typing a detailed reply, explaining the collaborative approach emerging from today's tenant meeting. Halfway through, she paused, considering the larger significance of what had occurred. The crisis had revealed the true strength of Westridge's transformation, not merely a different management approach or marketing strategy, but a fundamental shift in how the retailers viewed their relationship to each other and to the property. "The detailed analysis can wait until morning," Sarah wrote instead. "For now, just know that today I witnessed something remarkable: former competitors becoming genuine allies in the face of external threat. Crystal Point may take some tenants, but they can't replicate what we've built here." Elaine's response came quickly. "That's what I hope to hear. Sometimes pressure reveals true strength. Get some rest tomorrow. We plan our counteroffensive." Sarah smiled at the characteristic directness. Tomorrow would bring strategic planning and difficult decisions, but today had confirmed that Westridge's community-based revitalization was more than a management philosophy. It had become a shared vision, strong enough to withstand competitive pressure. Not bad for a former kiosk operator who'd once been deemed an eyesore, unworthy of mall space. 1 year later, Sarah stood at Westridge Mall's main entrance, watching the ceremonial ribbon cutting for the new community health center occupying the formerly vacant anchor space. The medical facility, a partnership between the regional hospital and local health organizations, would provide accessible care while generating daily foot traffic for the mall's retailers. "Quite the turnout," Elaine noted, joining Sarah at the observation point. Her mentor had flown in specifically for this milestone, recognizing its significance in Westridge's transformation. Indeed, the crowd was impressive. Community leaders, healthcare professionals, and mall tenants gathered together, their previous divisions largely forgotten. Local media captured the event, contrasting today's vibrant scene with Westridge's struggling past. "Crystal Point's grand opening is next month," Elaine commented. "How many tenants did you ultimately lose?" 3, Sarah replied. "All replaceable." The departures had created short-term challenges but ultimately allowed for more strategic tenant placement, businesses that embraced Westridge's community-centered approach rather than merely tolerating it. The ribbon fell amid applause, symbolizing more than just a new facility. It represented Westridge's complete reinvention from struggling traditional mall to integrated community hub combining retail, services, education, and now healthcare. Your equity stake has appreciated considerably, Elaine observed. Apex's board is impressed with the return on investment. Sarah nodded, though financial metrics had become secondary to other measures of success. The Community Impact Fund reached its annual goal last week. 27 families received medical assistance this year. The fund born from Richard's proposal during Emma's hospitalization had expanded beyond initial projections, with participating stores contributing a percentage of profits to support families facing medical crises. Speaking of Richard, Sarah spotted him among the crowd, deep in conversation with the hospital administrator. His store had not only remained at Westridge, but expanded, adding a repair workshop and apprenticeship program. The transformation from isolated luxury retailer to community business leader seemed complete as the ceremony concluded. Attendees moved toward the central court for a reception. Sarah circulated professionally, accepting congratulations while deflecting personal credit to the collaborative tenant community. "There you are," called a familiar voice. Emma approached, her health vastly improved after a year of successful treatment. At 14, she balanced teenage independence with the wisdom of someone who had faced serious illness. "Mom, they're asking for you to say something." Sarah smoothed her Jaquita gesture of preparation rather than nervousness. Public speaking had become routine in her role, though addressing this particular milestone felt significant. At the podium, Sarah surveyed the assembled crowd. Store owners who had once viewed each other as competitors now collaborated routinely. The luxury wing retailers chatted comfortably with kiosk operators. Even Frederick Hamilton, once her most vocal opponent, had become an advocate for the community approach. A year ago, Sarah began, Westridge faced a critical decision. We could compete with new developments on their terms, luxury exclusivity, separation from community, or we could embrace a different vision: integration, accessibility, mutual support. She acknowledged the challenges of that transition, the resistance, the crystal point threat, the difficult decisions about tenant selection and resource allocation. Today's health center represents the culmination of that vision. Not just a medical facility, but a symbol of what retail spaces can become when we prioritize community needs alongside business objectives. Sarah recognized key contributors: operational expertise, Marcus's security innovations, and the tenant committee that had championed the health center concept. She deliberately left her own role understated, emphasizing collective achievement rather than personal vindication. The reception continued. Sarah found a moment of quiet reflection near the renovated fountain. The space had been transformed from a purely decorative feature to a functional gathering area, with seating and interactive elements for children. Richard approached, 2 glasses of sparkling water in hand. "Quite the achievement," he said, offering her a drink. "Very different from what I envisioned for Westridge when we first clashed." "Different from what I imagined too," Sarah admitted. Her initial return to the mall had been fueled partly by revenge fantasies, making Richard and others experience the vulnerability they had inflicted on her. Reality had proven more complex and ultimately more satisfying. Julian's using West as his graduate thesis case study, Richard mentioned with evident pride, examining how retail spaces can serve as community connectors rather than mere commercial venues. "I'd like to read it when he's finished," Sarah replied. Their families had developed an unexpected connection over the past year. Julian mentoring Emma in business concepts, Emma providing Julian with the perspective of younger consumers. Richard gestured toward the health center. "When I signed that petition against your kiosk, I never imagined we'd end up here. That makes 2 of us." Sarah studied the man who had evolved from adversary to ally. "Though I'm glad we did." Their conversation was interrupted by Emma, who approached with excitement. "Mom, Gabriella's daughter just offered me a summer job at their new store. I'd help with the kids' clothing displays and learn the business side." The Martinez family business had flourished under Westridge's incubator program, graduating to a permanent inline space combining alterations with children's fashion design. "If that's what you want," Sarah replied, "and if Dr. Patel approves, your activity level." "Already asked him at my appointment yesterday," Emma confirmed with teenage efficiency. "He said regular retail hours would be good for my recovery. Structure and purpose, but not too physically demanding." As Emma departed to continue discussions with Gabriella, Richard raised his glass in a subtle toast. 2 second chances," he offered, "and unexpected directions." "Second chances," Sarah echoed, thinking of all the forms that concept had taken over the past 18 months for Emma's health, for her own career, for Westridge Mall itself, and even for her relationship with Richard. Later that evening, after the festivities concluded, Sarah walked the quiet concourse with Elaine, discussing future plans. The success of Westridge had led Apex Ventures to consider similar transformations at other properties, with Sarah potentially overseeing the expansion. "They'll want you to relocate," Elaine noted. "Corporate headquarters, bigger salary, wider influence." Sarah nodded, having anticipated this development. "Emma's treatment is working well here. Her doctors, her support system. Uprooting now would be challenging. Distance management is possible," Elaine suggested. "Frequent travel, video conferencing, perhaps," Sarah acknowledged, though the prospect held limited appeal. Her journey had begun with Emma's needs at the Sonora principal. She intended to maintain regardless of career opportunities. At the renovated north entrance, where her kiosk had once stood, Sarah paused, noting the small plaque commemorating the space's transformation from retail area to community hub. "Whatever you decide," Elaine said, following her gaze, "you've created something sustainable here, something that will continue whether you're physically present or not." The observation contained an important truth. Westridge's revitalization had transcended any individual's contribution even on her own. The community connections, collaborative structures, and shared vision would persist regardless of personnel changes. "I'll consider all options," Sarah promised, "but my priority remains close to home." As they exited into the evening air, Sarah glimpsed her reflection in the glass doors, confident, accomplished, at peace with choices made and challenges overcome. The woman who had once fought tears while packing her kiosk inventory now directed a thriving enterprise, built on principles of mutual success rather than zero-sum competition. The journey from eviction to ownership had transformed not just her professional circumstances, but her understanding of victory itself. What had begun as a quest for vindication had evolved into something more meaningful, creating spaces where different businesses could strengthen each other rather than competing for dominance. Outside, Emma waited by the car, scrolling through her phone with teenage absorption. Her health had stabilized, her future brightened. The medical battles weren't over, but they had become manageable challenges rather than overwhelming crises. "Ready to head home?" Sarah asked, joining her daughter. Emma looked up, her expression thoughtful beyond her years. "You know what's weird? If they hadn't kicked out your kiosk, none of this would have happened." "True," Sarah acknowledged. "Sometimes the worst moments lead to unexpected opportunities. Like when you get evicted from a mall and end up owning it," Emma grinned, "and tripling the rent for the mean people." Sarah laughed. "Well, the rent adjustments were based on objective criteria." "Sure, Mom," Emma replied with teenage skepticism. "Totally objective criteria that just happened to make them pay more, unless they stopped being jerks." As they drove home, Sarah reflected on Emma's assessment, not entirely inaccurate, though considerably simplified. The community impact system had indeed required attitudinal adjustments from retailers, previously focused solely on exclusivity and individual success. But the true victory wasn't making others pay for past wrongs. It was creating a system where everyone could succeed through cooperation rather than competition, including those who had once dismissed her business as unworthy of mall space. Not revenge, but redemption. For Westridge Mall, for its tenants, and ultimately, for Sarah herself.